Happy December. All right, just checking if you're awake. So this month we're going to take a look at, I love that theme of that talk, of that reading, the summer of winter. We're going to take a look at this time of year where we tend to celebrate light in the middle of darkening. You know, the earth is getting as far as, from the northern hemisphere, darker and darker, and yet we celebrate, we have all these festivals and festivities to celebrate and remember light. We have Hanukkah, we have the winter solstice, we have Christmas, and all these festivals to remember the light, to pay attention to the light. I think it was Howard Thurman who said that when we encounter darkness, we can walk by remembered radiance. We remember the radiance of the light. And I'd like to say that if I can even go a touch deeper than Howard, or with Howard, is that we walk by remembering the radiance that already lives within us, that is never extinguished, that is never in a winter state. Our outer world may be in a winter state, but that, as the reading says, there's a summer that's always happening deep within. And so we begin to remember that. So today we're going to take a look at a festival that's less known in our culture, but it's celebrated in the Buddhist world worldwide, and that is tomorrow is what's known as Bodhi Day. And it's the day of the Buddha that remembers the day of the Buddha's enlightenment, where he had sat under the Bodhi tree for 49 days and achieved enlightenment. And so we're going to take a look at that story, because like all the stories that we're going to look at this season, and all these wonderful stories, they're sacred stories, they're soul stories. They speak to archetypes within us, and we have things that we can learn and take into our lives out of this process. So we're going to look at the Buddha's life. Does that sound good?
Yeah.
The pre and up to enlightenment moment. So this is a wonderful sacred story. So Buddha, just like Jesus was not born Mr. Christ. Yes, that was a funny. Buddha was not born Mr. Buddha. He was born Siddhartha Gautama. And Gautama was the family name, just like Robinson is my family name. He was born, the last name is Gautama. And Siddhartha, his first name, literally means he who achieves his aim, which is a pretty powerful name. Not he who gets halfway to his aim, not he who starts off and wanders around, but he who achieves his aim. Isn't that a great name? So that's his name. And in the Buddhist tradition, there's all these stories that include all his lifetimes before, and how he was a bodhisattva in the angelic realm prior to coming, and he took form into his mother's womb with an immaculate conception. Sounds familiar? And he was born, without any pain to his mother whatsoever, in a garden under a tree, and some wise man who had been up in a cave for decades came down to pronounce how wonderful he was, and how he was either going to be a great king or a great holy man. So all this story around his birth, and all these omens and miracles and stuff like that. And that's not so much what I want to look at, but that's kind of the start of the story. That's where he starts from. His father was a great king or great prince in India. And he decided, he'd heard this prediction that said that if his son ever contemplated human suffering, that he would become a renunciant, a mendicant, an ascetic, somebody who gives up everything in life. And so he wanted his son to be the great king. The heck with that holy man stuff, let's be a king, right? Good life, better life, right? Than running around living on almost nothing. So he creates a life for him, and the family is extremely wealthy. He creates a life for him in which he's protected from suffering, any idea, any experience of human suffering, and also protected from any religious teachings. Don't let any of that religion stuff in there, get in there. It might, move him towards holy man. So he's protected from this. So he lives this wonderful, pampered, rich life. By the 16, he's got an arranged marriage. He's married to his some cousin of his, and they eventually have a son. And I love it. He names his son Rahula, which literally means chain or fetter. Hi, this is my kid, my ball and chain. That kind of fetter, That kid needed therapy, but he turned out okay in the end. But that was the life. So it's like protect him from any suffering. Do you notice what's happening in our culture today? Oftentimes, especially with our children, we like to protect them from any suffering, don't we? I've seen emails and little Facebook posts that go along and say that, we were the last generation to ever walk to school. Those of us who are a little bit older, we're the last generation to ever walk to school, to drink water out of a garden hose, to, all this stuff, ride our bikes downhill without helmets and do all this, stupid stuff. And nowadays it's protecting the children and keeping them all safe and stuff like that. And it's interesting because a scientist a number of years ago did an experiment with butterflies. Butterflies, when they emerge from the cocoon, have a tremendous struggle, and some of them don't make it. And so she thought, what happens if I would, cut the butterfly out of the cocoon so they don't have to go through that struggle as they're in the process? What would happen if I do that? And what happened was all the butterflies died, just extremely shortly afterwards. Now, butterflies don't have a long life anyways, but these had a much shorter life than even the regular butterfly because they never developed the strength to deal with the world. And so this is what the Buddha's father tried to do, was prevented him from experiencing anything, but that also gives, when he finally encounters the world, which he will later, it's a tremendous shock. It's not, knowing how to deal with that. The other area where we look at protection is with ourselves. We don't want to experience the suffering and the shadows and the hurt and the darkness that we know. In the back of our mind, we know we need to walk through in order to liberate ourselves, in order to get free of that pain and suffering, in order to live fully consciously in the world. That we try to hide out. So we avoid the classes that would really challenge us. We avoid, going to see a practitioner who's going to push our buttons and really, cause us to think and grow. And we do all sorts of things to just, let's stay in our comfort zone. I've had a number of friends who are religious scientists that they come to, a church like this for the social aspect. You meet nice people here, and it's great to hang out and stuff like that, but have not really ever pushed themselves and challenged themselves. I think it was Robert Bly who said that depression is the equivalent of standing in a threshold, in a doorway, and not walking through the doorway. And past the doorway are the fears, what you fear and that you'll have to experience. The hurt, the anger, the fears that we're facing, but we don't want to experience them. Behind us is the light, and we can't stand in that anymore. But we don't want to actually walk through and experience, because we're afraid if we step forward, we'll get lost in that process and we'll never come out. And so we stand in this threshold that's called depression, and don't move forward and don't move backwards. And so the invitation is to actually finally step through, and that's what the Buddha starts to talk about, starts to do. The other thing out of this thing with his father is that what we try to avoid, what we try to not face, what we try to not experience, comes to get us anyways. You ever notice that? I don't want to feel this. I'm going to do everything I can to avoid it. And oftentimes, by the very process of avoidance, brings us into that experience. And so that's what happens with his son, the Siddhartha. At 29, he finally says, I want us to find out what's beyond the palace walls. He's 29 years old. He's never been outside of this protected cocoon. Anybody ever see the movie Truman's World? Yeah, with Jim, I think it was Jim Carrey was in it, where he lives in this bubble existence, and he's being televised across the world and like that. And finally, one day, he finds the door outside of that world. He realizes it's a fake world. And so he wants to go outside. And so that's what the Siddhartha finally does. He says to his charioteer Channa, take me outside. Channa's kind of caught between a rock and a hard place because his boss, the father, has said, never let him go out. But he's supposed to do everything that Siddhartha says. So, how do you make that work? He finally takes him outside. And he has what are called the four sights. He encounters an old man, and he's never seen aging. He's never seen old people before. He encounters a diseased man, a person with disease, a person who's very sick. He encounters a corpse, a person who has died. And he encounters an ascetic, a religious renunciant, one of the Hindu monks that has given up everything and living in a saffron robe and begging for alms and holding meditation. And he says, and he finally realizes he's so traumatized by this and he's so shocked by this. He said, I want to find out what causes this human suffering. He's never seen human suffering before. And so when it finally hits him, it hits him so hard. And he says, I want to find out what causes this and how to relieve it. because it's so powerful and it's so painful to witness. How can I do that? How can I do that? And so he decides to become a renunciant, a mendicant himself. He decides to give up his pampered life, leave the palace, and go out and beg for alms. And he does this with so much intensity and so much passion and so much urgency. There's an Indian word, samvega, which means spiritual urgency. I have to do this. How many of us have had something that we know is ours to do and we have to do it? It may not be a huge thing, but we've had relationships we know we have to either get into or get out of. We've had jobs we know are ours to either do or get out of. We've had situations and we know, and it's that spiritual urgency. And what spiritual teachers say is we need that urgency to start the path. It's what gets us onto the path, and it is what takes us down the path with enough momentum to carry us through the challenging times. And so he has this, I have to find the answer. I have to find the solution. This samvega. So he begins to go on his way. He gets the saffron robe. He takes his charioteer with him as a friend and begins to beg for alms in a completely different city. The king's men recognize him, go to the king and say, "Hey, that's Siddhartha, out here begging for alms, and what the heck's going on?" And his father is, what's he going to say? And so the king actually comes down, meets him there, and offers him his throne. He offers him his whole kingdom. And this is like us being called back. When we first start on the spiritual path, there's a part of us that gets called back. Will you come back? Will you come back to the old way? Come on. And it sounds so good. And fortunately, the Buddha, of course, says no. He gets farther down the spiritual path, and he meets a couple of different yogic meditation teachers, not at the same time, but in sequence. And both of them teach him yogic meditation. The second one is deeper than the first one. But each of them, he becomes so successful and so good at it that they actually offer him their teaching position, their leadership of the school. They say, "You lead the school. You're so brilliant." And again, he remembers, I did not come here to lead a school of meditation. I came here. My purpose is to find out what causes human suffering and how to alleviate it, how to relieve it. So he stays on his purpose. He stays focused. There's a wonderful phrase in the Bible, the Hebrew Bible, that says, "Keep thine eyes single." Keep yourself focused on why did you really come here, and don't get distracted. And so he has these wonderful temptations of power, if you will, and he keeps his eye focused on why he's really here. Powerful, powerful step in our spiritual process. He finally, for a number of years, about 5 years, he follows this path of extreme asceticism. He's given up everything. He's got 5 friends who are supporting him, fellow monks who are the 5 of them, the 6 of them are traveling together. They're doing all their process and stuff like that. And he's down to, according to legend, eating 1 grain of rice or 1 nut or 1 leaf a day. I don't know about you, but I wouldn't do too well with that kind of a diet. But he's got himself down to that, and he's so wasted away. And finally, one day, he's down at a river, and he's so basically starved that he literally passes out, falls in the river, and practically drowns. Manages to pull himself up on the shore and climb up on the shore, and sits under a tree and starts to meditate. And this young girl from the nearby village, sees him there, and he's so far gone that she thinks he's a spirit. And she thinks he's the spirit of the tree there to grant her a wish. So she brings him food, which is what you would do to the tree spirits in those days. She brought him food, and he accepts the food. Now this is totally outside of what, as a renunciant, he's supposed to do. He's not supposed to be eating this nice food. And so, but he finally takes it, he finally says, he begins to have an awareness that meditation, this deep meditation he's doing, is the path. But the asceticism just keeps him so hungry and so starved and so weak that he can't really do what he came here to do. And so he begins to practice what he calls the middle way. Not so much self-indulgence, but also not so much self-deprivation. Either one could be considered an ego state. So something that's in the middle that supports that. And this is one of the precepts of Buddhism that's famous these days, is that middle way. Not too much of this, not too little of this. So we walk the middle way. His friends, of course, think that he's gone off the wagon, give him up, abandon him in disgust, walk away from him, and it's like, you failed. But he's he understands what he's doing. What I also look at this little metaphor as is the young woman who offers him, throughout his story up until now, he's been hanging out with guys. Because all the monks are guys at this point in time. He's been hanging out with guys. He's been hanging out with that masculine intellect, this is how you do it. And finally, this wonderful village girl, this innocent, divine, feminine energy, finally opens up the heart and says, get off it. We guys sometimes can tend to go off on a little tangent. Has anybody ever noticed that? We get a little, maybe too far. Yeah, Reverend Kay's got her hand up there. Yeah, she knows one. And like that. I mean, women can do it too. The divine feminine can go off in a whole different tangent too and needs a little, pulling back. But this woman finally brings him back. I like to think of it that she opens up his heart and finally connects the head and the heart together, which is what his practice took. Up until then, it was all head. It was all, this is the proper way, this is the right way, and we're not going to do the right way, we're going to do the right way to the extreme. Okay? And she finally opens it up and says, yeah, a little balance would be a really good thing for you, buddy. We guys tend to know that when we fall in love, when we finally, have a life partner or a woman in our lives, it tends to mellow us out a little bit, right? Many of us. So he finally gets to this. And he finally comes to the point where he says, okay, he's got the balance, he's got that. And he says, I'm going to sit under this banyan tree, this Bodhi tree. I'm not going to leave until either I die or I find the answer. He puts it all on the line. This is living up to his name of Siddhartha, the one who achieves his aim. And he finally says, I'm not leaving until I get the answer. I've had times in my meditation and times of my prayers where I've had to sit there and go, God, I'm not moving forward until I know the answer. Some of you have probably had that process. No more of this in my life. I need to know the answer and I need to know it now. And I'm not leaving, I'm not moving forward, I'm not quitting until I know the answer, or I die, whatever, maybe not, physically die, but, until something happens. That's where the Buddha is at. He sits under this tree, he says, I'm not leaving until then. During this time, the daughters of Mara is a male considered demon. The daughters of Mara, 3 of them, come to tempt him, and which echoes the 3 temptations of Jesus when he's out in the desert for his 40 days and 40 nights. And so the 3 daughters, and the Hindus are a little more colorful in their descriptions and stuff like that. But the 3 daughters come and they try and tempt him. And the daughters are considered, they stand for craving, having cravings. Now, most of us don't have cravings. I mean, Sylvia mentions, dark chocolate, and I go salivate. But most of you probably aren't like that. You don't have any cravings. But cravings, boredom, and then lust. And that's what the 3 of them represent. And what I want to say is those are still, to this day, any of you who've practiced deep, long meditation, you've encountered at least one of those 3 daughters somewhere in your practice, right? The stuff that gets your mind off, takes you somewhere else. Boredom, why am I sitting here in this, meditation cushion, breathing in, breathing out once again, I remember the very first Sunday I was here, James Golden was talking about a retreat that he was doing, and he says, and he said people were asking him, is it going to be the same thing, the same spiritual, practice of doing meditation? He says, yes, it is going to be the same practice. And so few people showed up that it was canceled, So we have this, we don't want to sit there and do, sit and just sit until we have the answer. We live in a culture where we want stimulation, 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 and that's the craving. And that to a degree is the lust. The mind wants stimulation. Give me something new. Give me a different message. And so we wander from teacher to teacher and book to book. And I have a friend of mine who says that if you encountered the book that would finally give you the answers to life and help you to really, truly live the life you wanted, would you buy it? Again. It's already sitting on your shelf. So these are the daughters of Mara who come to tempt him. And during this time, he's shown in a meditative posture where he's sitting on the ground. He has his left hand up on his lap like this. And his right hand is resting on his knee with his fingers either touching or pointed at the earth, to where he's grounding himself to the earth. And it's a certain meditation mudra, positioning of the hands, that it grounds us to the earth. As we're talking about this time of winter and the summer of winter, the leaves are no longer moving up towards the light because there's not enough light to stimulate them to move to. It's the roots that are moving deep into the ground, towards the warmth of the ground. And so it's a wonderful thing to remember that as our temptations come to us, as the things that want to pull us off our spiritual path come to us, to ground ourselves, to stay grounded, to stay centered. And even the Buddha in this process finally does it. So finally, after 49 days of this, he opens his eyes one morning and sees the morning star at dawn, and he has this moment of enlightenment. It all kind of unfolds before him. And what he comes out with this, or what is known as the Four Noble Truths, in the Eightfold Path, which is the basic tenets of Buddhism. And the Four Noble Truths, there's a number of ways of translating that. And the translation that I love says, number one, all temporary things or states are unsatisfying. That piece of chocolate, once I eat it, it goes away and I want some more. Christmas comes, and we anticipate. Remember when you were kids, you anticipated Christmas was such a big thing, and you built it up, and you built it up, and you built it up, and somehow after it was gone, it was never quite lived up to the expectation that we hoped it would, right? So these temporary things, these temporary states, are always unsatisfying. Number two, because we crave and cling to these things, we suffer. Because we crave and cling to these things, we suffer. So rather than going for the permanent, rather than going for the spiritual, rather than going for the essence, we go for the temporary, we go for the stuff out here, and it never satisfies. And so out of that we suffer. The third noble truth, if we stop, this is pretty self-obvious, if we stop craving and clinging, we become free. And we go, yeah, that's great. How do you do that exactly? And so that's what he says, the Eightfold Noble Path, the Eightfold Path. Following the Buddhist path is the way to become free of this clinging and this craving. And so the Eightfold Path is this series of right these things. And so right view. Right view is what we would call our belief system, our consciousness, or how we view the world. And by looking at the glass, seeing it half empty, half full, or the glass as just whole, complete, and perfect, exactly as it is. Okay? What is my view? So we have a right view of the world. We have again, in the Bible it says, judge with righteous judgment. So we have a correct view, we have a healthy view of the world. And then secondly, we have a right intention. So it's not enough to just have a view. This is why I'm doing the intentions retreat. It's not enough to just have a belief system that's in alignment. It's then we have to focus that belief system by setting intention. And so we have intention of what we do and why we do it. And that also has to be healthy, and that also has to be right. Because if we're not, then if we don't set intentions, we just get whatever comes along, pulls us in whatever direction it does at the moment. And so we're kind of like floating down a river, just bobbing, instead of going down the river in a boat with a rudder and sails and direction. So right intention. And then right speech. Once I have this view, once I have my intention, I begin to speak in alignment with that view and in alignment with that intention. So my life begins to start to reflect that, and so my speech begins to reflect that. From my speech, after my speech, then comes right action. So now I'm walking my talk. I have my view healthy, I have my intentions clear, I'm speaking in alignment with that, and now I'm practicing that by walking my talk. I'm walking in alignment with that. And I'm not deviating from that path. Out of that comes right livelihood. I have right livelihood. And livelihood is not just, our occupation that we go to 8 hours a day. It's the life that we live, the whole life that we live. Michael Beckwith would put it that we stabilize our life structures. We stabilize our life structures. And so that our work, our relationships, our health and body, everything begins to come into alignment with that. And so we begin to become stable in that way. We begin to have that right livelihood. And then from that, once we're stable in that, we make right effort towards our enlightenment, towards what's the next step. And so we begin to not struggle and not avoid, but make the right effort. You know, there's some people who are like desperately seeking enlightenment. We're not doing that. And there's some people who it's like, yeah, I have enlightenment stuff, I don't want to talk about that. And we're not doing that. We make a balanced, healthy effort. We move into right mindfulness, to where we have our attention is placed where it needs to be placed. We're mindful where we need to be mindful. And we are mindful in our whole lives. You know, right now I'm teaching a class on meditation. And ultimately, meditation becomes how I live my life. Everything becomes a meditative process. Meditation is paying undistractable attention to reality. And if I'm in that clear mindfulness, if I'm in that state, then everything I'm doing, I'm paying undistracted attention to what it is that I'm doing. I am present with what I'm doing. I'm not doing it thinking about this over here. And so I'm present with it. If I'm watching, I see my friend Luke over there, if I'm watching the Ducks trounce whoever they're playing, I'm fully present with the Oregon Ducks trouncing whoever they're playing. If I'm eating a piece of chocolate, I'm completely present with it. I'm not craving, I'm not hoping for the next one. But whatever it is, I'm being a little bit playful here, but the mindfulness practice, I stay present. And then finally, concentration. I train my mind into a right and healthy concentration. I put it again in the direction of where I need to go. So this is the Eightfold Noble Path of the Buddha. And this is a wonderful roadmap for us to look at and say, how can I live my life? How can I live my life? So this week I'm going to invite you to do three things. Number one, taking a look at the Buddha's father. What am I hiding or protecting myself from? Take a breath. What am I hiding or protecting myself from that I know that I need to step into and face? What am I hiding? And am I willing to do it with that energy of samvega, that spiritual urgency, that, you know what, I've been hiding from this. This thing has had me long enough. You know, I'm tired of it running my life. I want my life back. I take spiritual urgency to make sure that I get that life back. Number two, I begin to walk that middle path. And we're in the holiday season, right? That's, you know, this is a challenging time to walk the middle path as far as food's concerned and celebration and some of that stuff. But it's a great time because it's a perfect time of discipline. Can I walk the middle path as I go through this? You know, we see all this excess happening out, you know, from us, and then we hear the bah humbuggers over on the other side, you know, and so can I walk the middle path? Can I enjoy the holidays but not get so far and so lost in them that I forget who I am and what this is about? So can I walk the middle path in my life? And finally, what is calling me? What is calling me, and am I willing to go all the way? The Buddha's call was to find and relieve human suffering. What is my call? It may not be so great or grand. It may be something that seems small, but that's a comparison right now, but it is still your call. And each call leads us to another call, and it leads us to another call. What is it that is calling me in my life right now? And am I willing to answer it? Am I willing to say yes to it? Yes. What is it that's calling me? And so I begin to answer that call. So I want to leave you with a Buddhist greeting. The Buddhists oftentimes say to each other as they greet. And the greeting is Buddhu Saranai. Buddha Saranai. And what it means is, may the peace of the Buddha be with you. When I'm in that space of walking the right path, of living a right life, when I'm in that space of having compassion and kindness, which are qualities of Buddhism and qualities of the Buddha for all living things. So I'm not judging people. That person is not really, living their life. We're not doing that. We're having compassion for all beings and expressing kindness for all beings. When I'm living like that, I experience the peace of the Buddha. And that peace is not, and that enlightenment is not a one-time thing. See, Buddhism isn't a place to get to heaven and then we're there and we arrive. It's a way of how to be in this world and continue to live and live and live and express. So may the peace of the Buddha be with you this week and this month and always. Let's move into prayer. So I know that there is one infinite presence, called by so many names, and yet there is that one presence, and it is pure peace, and it is pure light. There is nothing that moves it away from peace, and there is no darkness that can possibly come over it. It is this pure peace and this pure light of the universe, absolute infinite love. This presence is all there is. This presence is all there is. And because it is all that there is, each of us is one of it. Each of us is an expression of that peace, an expression of that light, an expression of that love. Light is not something that is outside of us. It is within us. We are the light. We are the peace. We are the love of the infinite right here, right now. The peace of the Buddha is with us. And so I speak my word that we awaken to that. That we become during this time, during this week, ever more aware of the truth of who we are. We take the time to sit quietly and become aware of our peace, become aware of the light, become aware of the love that lives within us, that is never suppressed, that is never held back, that is beyond all the stuff and all the stories and all the experiences of our lives. It is beyond that. And so we sit in that consciousness of saying, I am willing to see that. I'm willing to see through the illusion and the stuff that has held me back and simply know the truth of who I truly am. The infinite in form, the peace, the light, the love in form. And so we say yes to that. And allow it to move through us and express in and as our lives. And from that peace we give great gratitude. From that love we experience great gratitude for life exactly as it has unfolded, exactly as it is right this moment, all of it. And so out of that gratitude, and out of the gratitude for the spirit that is expressing as this life, we simply allow this to unfold. We let it go. We let the process of how it shows up go. We simply let it be. And together we say, and so it is. Thank you. So I'd like to call the ushers forward for our
to love.